First, how many people has been involved in importation of horses that we have in the room?
Internationally or?
Internationally. Yeah. So I'm just preaching to the choir. How many in exports? Do we have any APHIS people in the room? That's a good thing. Primarily, we mostly export. We have a warehouse here in Columbus at Rickenbacker Airport, which is a freight airport, and that's where we ship out of. We reach every place: Europe, Africa, China, and Russia, and all the countries that way. To export to South Central America, we have to go to Miami, and that's really not the ticket anymore, but that's what we have to do. We'll go through the importation for those that's not familiar. The importation, there's 4 ports here east of the Mississippi, or we have 4 ports, period, in the United States that you can bring in horses. It's LAX, JFK, ORD, Miami. The quarantine and testing up on arrival, depending on which country they're imported from, would determine your testing needs. The best advice I can give you is work with your local APHIS people, and the one thing in this industry, you don't never assume anything. You go back and you double check and you check again. I'm terrible at that, but my wife's pretty good. She keeps me straight. You got to make arrangements with the quarantine in advance, well in advance, because there's only so much room for imported horses, and there's certain times of year those reservations gets filled up. Usually most of the protocols, or a lot of them, will say 3 days in USDA quarantine, do your test, and they have to go into another quarantine with tests later by the USDA APHIS people. And but it's always check with your local office, and sometimes they don't understand. The terrible thing about a health protocol, it's all in the interpretation. You can read it one way, somebody else is going to read it one way, but the bottom line, the final decision's at Riverdale, Maryland. And so work closely with your APHIS people. For exportation, the first thing that we do is go to the APHIS website and see what the health protocol would demand, what testing, how long of quarantine, and get that all and work with your APHIS people and make sure you're on the same page. And then obtain stalls or booking from an airline, which I'm going to tell you, we're a freight forwarder and we're licensed, and the airlines sometimes can be very acceptable to shipping dates. Other times, you got to remember what time of year it is. Our busy times, November, December, after the sales in Lexington of the thoroughbreds. So that's the other. Don't start today and think you're going to do it tomorrow. Start well in advance, as soon as you know, and get your booking. Usually they like 30 days. Once in a while I surprise them and tell them I need it next week, and that usually don't go very well for me. Then secure a groom, and this is an important deal. There's a lot of people wants to fly with horses, but there's very few that's qualified. You can get into predicaments. I had one groom that I respect quite a bit. He had a horse that reared and got over the front Exportation in the stall, and he was by himself, and he made the engineer on the flight a horse person before he's done. They got him flipped over. But once you're in the air and something like that happens, you're at the mercy. And gosh, there's so many people now with communications the way they are, and the animal rights people, and you don't want to mess up because everybody's going to know. Get your groom, cut your paperwork for the airlines. You'll need groom docs, airway bills, live cattle or live animal certs, commercial invoice. Then you schedule your trucking from your quarantine. Animals to arrive at port departure at least 8 hours. For us, and we'll go over our operation out here in Columbus, we don't need 8 hours. Sometimes there's, depending on APHIS, cut you some slack. We're bringing horses straight from Lexington straight to the airport under a sealed trailer, and that seems to be working. It's a 3-hour ride, and it alleviates some stress on loading and loading again. And I keep pushing the wrong number. Establish your temporary quarantine prior to flight. We're a permanent embarkation here in Columbus, and under that we have to have a permanent inspection center where the APHIS officer will go out there and inspect the horses and make sure that they're fit and there's no possible problems. Last day of quarantine reached, then we used to be able to get the papers endorsed after the test, but somebody in Riverdale decided that we shouldn't do that anymore, so now we have to get all the test results back and then get papers endorsed from APHIS, then we can proceed. So you really got to plan your work schedule here, because if you mess up one day, you're kind of behind the 8 ball. Some countries require an import permit. That gets difficult too, because some countries will give you an import permit at the beginning of your or export permit at the beginning of your quarantine. Some of them waits until certain test results are back, and some of them will even wait until the paper's endorsed by USDA, APHIS. And so it's really important that you stay on schedule. Then you have to get the airline the copies of the endorsed paperwork, and as some of you know that's exported, you make copy after copy after copy, so everybody, and you don't surrender the originals to anybody except the groom or somebody that's going on the flight. Never let those papers out of your jurisdiction. Then they move from the temporary quarantine and check-in location to plainside, and then we try to have them there, and we're fortunate. Most of our flights come in from Anchorage, Alaska, so we're in contact with the air carrier usually half the night and most of the day, knowing when that plane, we know after that plane leaves Anchorage, 5.5 hours it's going to be here, barring no mechanicals. And that's the other thing, I've been involved in some really deals where we had mechanicals and it's out of everybody's hands, and so you have to be prepared if that does happen, to decide how we're going to, and APHIS, you need to work with your local APHIS people and have a plan what we're going to do. Horses moved to temporary to plainside and put in the airway stalls and moved to plain. There's a permit I don't know how well you can see it, from Saudi Arabia. You definitely need that before the airlines even receive the horses. And it pretty much explains itself, and every country is going to be different. Health certificates, your endorsed health certificate, and as I said before, do not let them get out of your hands, and you make sure the groom has them. A couple times the air carrier talked me into putting them in the manifest. You don't want to do that, because the manifest has got many things in it, and they got lost once upon a time, and it got ugly quick. Okay, we're at the airport, ready to load the stalls. We try to avoid all stress or undue stress. Sometimes our local APHIS people works really well with us to do this, but sometimes some people in Riverdale don't understand stress and on these animals. You know, we ship some out of Chicago and JFK. You take them out on the tarmac, and you got jets coming in, and you got 100 people standing around because they want to see the horse, and lots of noise, and it's just undue stress. And you know, they're stressed enough. New environments, transportation, ground transportation. So we try to eliminate it. In our warehouse, we nothing's running. It's quiet. If somebody even talks, they get in trouble, and you never want to get in trouble by me. My wife says there's a lot of things I say in the heat of the moment that she says, "Don't you wish you wouldn't have said that?" And sometimes I'm a little embarrassed what I did tell them. But and before I started in the industry, I was pretty quiet and mild, but you learn a lot of swear words and you know, learn to throw your hat down on the concrete and kick it, but at our warehouse we have qualified people that's been around horses and livestock. They understand there's no jerking. We load right into the air stall, but it's the big thing. It's quiet. There's essentially our warehouse and the jet stall. I'm sure most of you have seen it. This particular one is Cargo Lux, and they usually have really good stalls, and you know, the only noise that, and we always put a groom or somebody goes up the K-loader with the horses to keep them calm. Usually like to send the groom because they're used to them particular horses. We ship a lot of thoroughbreds, and sometimes they can be a little hot, but we try to avoid all the stress that we can. We have a transfer box. It's 8 foot high. They can't see over the side. They can't see out. It's off the trailer into the airway stall. There's a shipment of thoroughbreds we had here this winter. We can back 6 semis in the warehouse, drop the ramps, and they just go from one truck to the other. They don't have to go up an incline. So that's some things that we do that helps alleviate stress. That's the air stall up in the plane. There's one of my grooms. He's hard at it. He's just chilling, I guess. This was a big shipment we had of 64 thoroughbreds, bred mares. At one, it was all on one plane. I think they were going to the Middle East, but it takes coordination to get those all loaded, and we can load one with 3 horses in 15 minutes. We furnish the nets and the buckets and the water jugs. Usually they bring their hay because we don't want to change diets. We like to give the horse what they're used to. Well, that ain't quite a horse, but here's some things that we do besides horses. That's a rhino for the Cincinnati Zoo that went to Malaysia, and we'll go through some of the other things that we do that's been kind of interesting. That was 240 head of white-tailed deer going to Russia. There was no protocol with Russia for deer, and through our local APHIS office and myself, we negotiated one. But if anybody's ever dealt with Russians, it's a real joy. Some goats. We do pigs, cattle, and this is a ship in Australia that I helped load. It held 55,000 head of sheep and 14,000 head of 7-weight feeder cattle. So we do a lot of different things. We're not experts at anything, but it's just a lot of common sense in any living thing. You just try to do what's right for the animals.